going to compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
But, you know, I'm not going to say no to George Lucas.
Right. Sorry, I'm getting like emotional.
And you got this hulking, scary dude with the big nose and the perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
Cassie and Jim on the beach, if people are like, no. I can literally hear people go, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie. And then, of course, I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, you know, get to hear their stories.
And in the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different and are different species. There's lizard men. There's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, welcome to Around the Galaxy, and it's a hot evening here in New Jersey. I am those of you who follow me on Twitter know that my air conditioning has chosen the best possible week to be out, so I'm a little sweaty. I'm a little moist, but I'm really excited for you to be joining us tonight, my patrons. Thanks for checking in and hanging out with us tonight. We have a very special guest. We have a gentleman named Tom Spina, who is the founder and designer, and we're going to hear his full story from Regal Robot, who you are probably familiar with if you are at all related to Star Wars collectibles, or even just like to look at cool Star Wars stuff that people have created. So without further ado, let me bring in Tom Spina. Tom, how are you?
Hello, how are you? Thank you for that great intro.
Well,
and also thank you for that great video, like montage music. Like I felt like we both needed to like just pick up an instrument and like
yeah, it's funny. That was a song that was part of my pandemic therapy. A couple guys that I got to know who I've never met in person through social media. We've created a band called Silver Colored Knob, named after the little knob from The Mandalorian, and we've done like 4 or 5 Star Wars theme songs, and that was actually called Stormtrooper. So yeah, that's it's a hopping little number, but I'm glad you like it.
You ever need a guest spot to throw a little extra guitar on, you know who to call.
You're in. You're definitely in. So Tom, for the people who may not know who you are, maybe give us a short introduction.
Short introduction's tough. We've been it's a lot. So my name is Tom Spina. I own Tom Spina Designs and Regal Robot. With Tom Spina Designs, we do things like make stuff for theme parks, things like place like Galaxy's Edge, which some folks into Star Wars might know. We also make creatures and aliens, and you might have seen some of the Star Wars characters we created for things like Super Bowl commercials and online videos and stuff for various Lucasfilm projects. We did the Chewbacca tour suits and stuff like that. We also restore original movie props, which is kind of the main thing that we got known for because it's so unique. And we've even gotten to restore for the Lucasfilm Archives, which is absolute dream project level stuff. And then Regal Robot grew out of some of the home theming and things we were doing with TSD. And with Regal, we actually have the license with Lucasfilm and Disney to make Star Wars themed home decor. And that can range from things that hang on a wall or magnets or little mini sculptures and stuff like that. And now even big themed furniture and life-size characters and prop replica type stuff. And it's really neat. I mean, this is definitely dream job territory.
Yeah.
And, well, thank you. I'm going to say Framey.
That's right.
For that very nice. There we go. That's what I'll just say from now on. Tom, introduce yourself. I may be very well the coolest design company on the planet.
Well, I mean, it's your stuff is top level. It's so detailed, and the reason for that is because you have direct access to the archives, right?
I mean, yes, certainly that comes with the territory being a licensee. It's not always a thing for licensees, but for the type of stuff that we're doing, we do get that kind of access. And we certainly use that to the best we can. A lot of our access and lineage for the stuff we're doing, though, also just comes from my years in the business, my getting to know a ton of effects folks and a lot of people that were, frankly, my idols growing up who worked on Star Wars and who either still had elements that we could work with on some of these things, or maybe they had rare photos that no one ever saw before and different looks at things, or in some cases now in this new world is, digital files and things like that. We actually just did, great example of this, we just did the holochess figures, as seen in A New Hope. They were recreated for The Force Awakens by Phil Tippett's team. And Phil and John Berg made them originally. And Phil's team, when remaking them for Force Awakens, went and scanned a lot of the old puppets that still exist, luckily. Some of them in the archives, some of them in private collections. And through knowing Phil and through working with him on other stuff, we were able to get those files and make him a part of this project and actually recreate these from the actual digital files, these actual scans off the original puppets from the 70s that his team, painstakingly put back together and give fans a chance to get something that really they'd never get a chance at otherwise. And that's the stuff that gets me really excited, because I'm a huge fan of the story behind the story. My big drive is just, how did these movies get made? I look at them as just these miraculous things that it is absolutely miraculous that these things actually ended up on screen, especially the first Star Wars, where there was so much working against it and so much had to be invented to make that movie possible. And that to me is the real story of Star Wars that I get so drawn to.
It's interesting because, and I totally agree with you. And there's something about Star Wars, even for me, who I didn't pursue obviously a career in prop building and that sort of thing. But I remember that was one of the things that interested me most as a kid, was anything behind the scenes that I could find. There was one thing to see this Star Wars world come to life on the screen, but there was another, it encouraged a lot of people like yourself, like me, to want to understand what happened behind it. So maybe let's take half a step back and understand your introduction to Star Wars. How old were you when you saw it? What was your first Star Wars memories? And
So, I was about 5 years old when I saw it. My earliest Star Wars memories are actually of the storybook. And I've kind of, that book, I still have it to this day. And that really was my entry into this world. My folks didn't take me to see the movie right away. It was a different time too. This is 77. Sure. This is not, there weren't a ton of movies out there. We didn't always go to the movies. We weren't huge movie-going fans, although we became that way after Star Wars. It became much more of an important experience. Prior to Star Wars, for me, it was King Kong and it was The Wizard of Oz. It was anything fantastical or that had stop motion in it or that had things that I knew couldn't have happened, but like magic tricks. Like I was fascinated by magic and stuff like that. And to me, that's special effects right there. It's an illusion. It's a magic trick. And I mean, there's a thing in the effects industry for makeup guys where you call it a gag. Those gags are all magic tricks. Yes. It looks like that guy got his arm cut off, or it looks like that tauntaun was split down the belly, that no tauntauns were harmed in the making of Empire Strikes Back. So to me, that was definitely a thing. And I would read that storybook like crazy, and I would look through those pictures, and that the Cantina spread, there's a 2-page spread of Cantina aliens that did me in. That, if you want to talk about when the die was cast, prior to that, I was a creative kid. I was always making stuff. I was making masks. I was making monsters. I was making little, I would take Legos and make spaceships out of them and try and turn them into things I saw on screen. I loved puppets and the Muppets and all of this other stuff. But that Cantina scene just brought it all together. It was like, oh, okay, now here's costumes, here's masks, here's monsters, here's puppetry, and just all of this stuff came together in all of these wild creatures from all these different, worlds.
Right.
And I instantly, my heroes instantly changed from, Dorothy and the Scarecrow, and certainly King Kong was my hero in that story, even though I know some people. But it became, without even knowing their names, Rick Baker and Phil Tippett and Stuart Freeborn and John Berg and Lane Liska and Rob Bottin and Doug Beswick and all of these guys, Nick Maley and Chris Tucker, etc. All of the guys responsible for that team were now my idols. And I was like 5,
Yep.
And I don't know, so there were a lot of great making ofs through the Star Wars years, especially by the time you get to Jedi. And now I'm like 10, 11, 12 years old, and I can absorb some more of this stuff. And I'm watching from Star Wars to Jedi, the making of a saga, where they went really in depth on the creature side, Phil Tippett's creatures shop. And I was able to put a lot more of that together by then. I had started to make more stuff. I was, already sculpting a bit. I was fabricating things all the time. I would get whatever I could get my hands on, whether it was, 1/2-inch sheet foam, or if it was a little bottle of rubber latex, slip latex that I could get from the magic shop in town, or, clay that I would get at KB Toys, because that was the only place I could think of to buy plasticine,
right?
And I would just say, it's like, okay, it's a non-hardening clay, so that's good. I can use that, and plaster I could get from the hardware store, Plaster of Paris. Not the best thing to use for molds, I found out, but that's what I had access to. And then it was starting to find magazines, Fangoria and Starlog, and then, even some of the more mature magazines like Deep Red and Gore Zone and all these ones that were really about like horror makeup effects.
Yep.
But those were the ones that really gave you more of an insight into how they were making the stuff. So I'd be reading that stuff and going like, oh, well, if they can make a mold of an arm, or a monster face or a bloody face or something, I could make an alien face and I could make a mold of that. And then I'd have an alien to put on, or I'd see them, by the time I get into high school, there's Tom Savini's book. I had already seen like some of Dick Smith's book, Dick's book and stuff. And now you're starting to get into some nitty gritty of technique.
Right.
And I was able to just start to hone craft and to put more things together.
So, and did you pursue going into movie effects, or how did you get to Tom Spina Designs?
The hard way.
Of course.
So I thought, so funny enough, all of this time I'm making movies in the basement. I'm trying to remake scenes from Return of the Jedi and Star Wars and Ghostbusters and whatever else I saw. And we were always writing some movie, me and my friends. We were always blowing up things in the backyard like models and trying to run it in slow motion. Because we would watch the Making of Empire Strikes Back special, which we could rent from the local mom and pop video store. They had that SPFX, the Making of Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
And there's a shot where they're running a snow speeder, down a couple of wires on a diagonal, and it blows up halfway down. And we were like, we could do that. If we got some firecrackers and we take them apart, and by the way, don't try this at home. Please, I don't want letters. I said no. But we tried it. And
you did it, but nobody else did.
It wasn't safe, and I don't recommend it, but it was cool. So yeah, like that was the sort of stuff we were always doing, and you'd get the thing where you'd be working on something, or we'd be shooting some Indiana Jones thing for our class project, and we're trying to make like, the whatever our MacGuffin was for the movie had to blow up at the end of it. And so we're like, I just remember blowing something up in the backyard and just hearing like, roop, roop. Guys, you want to knock it off with the firecracker? And we look, and there's like a cop like just staring directly. Somehow he had a line into the backyard and could see it from around the corner. And we're like, busted, did we get it?
Did we get the shot?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's funny. So from there,
I mean, to answer your question, which I totally ignored.
That was a much better story, though.
So we were doing all of that, and I was getting into computer effects because we didn't have the ability to do opticals. We couldn't do, I was dying to do blue screen. I was dying to do Luma key. I would read all these books on camera tricks, and we couldn't even do titles over our stuff. Like kids today have no idea the struggle that we had just trying to put a title card on a movie.
Right.
So I got into the computer lab in high school, and they had a whole bunch of these Amiga 1000s. They were called 1000 because they had 1000 kilobytes of RAM.
Right.
That's not a lot. That's a megabyte, for anyone who's wondering.
Monstrous machines at the time.
Less than most JPEGs now, but I was lucky. I had a wonderful instructor there she was very interested in what was happening in that realm, very interested in trying to push things further. And she was great about finding students that had this interest and passion, bringing them into the lab and letting us use the lab, off hours and on our lunches and finish our projects. And she really pushed us. She's outstanding, one of the pivotal people in my life. And through doing that, I was able to start doing some base effect stuff, some like laser bolts overlays and stuff. We got a gen lock at one point, and that meant we could generation lock our video with the graphics, and we could do an overlay of a title, which was insane. And we could do, graphics with 32 colors at one point. And that ultimately was endlessly fascinating to me. And then you had things like the Amiga Toaster and all this other stuff come out. I really stayed on top of that for a while, but I was always combining it with practical stuff. I was always using, those elements as a way to, if we could blue screen this, because ultimately on the toaster, there was a separate unit you could get and you could blue screen stuff. I'm like, if we blue screen that, we could do some puppetry stuff, and we wouldn't have to be shooting outside somewhere. We could have, we could bring it in here, or we could go to some exotic location. We set up a blue screen thing in the house, and we're doing this puppet stuff where you could we could blue screen out a performer or a wire, or, is there some way to merge this stuff? And ultimately, the computer technology for home use, even prosumer level, wasn't catching up, wasn't keeping up to what you really needed to do any of this stuff. It got real frustrating. So I just started focusing on the sculpting. I started focusing on the mask making and the monster making. And I was collecting props and things like that. And I started connecting. Now the internet takes form, this, early 90s, mid 90s. There's the AOL chat boards, and you started to connect with other guys collecting the old vintage Star Wars figures. Yep. Maybe you get someone who, wanted to make a lightsaber, and we started talking about what could it be made from? What do you think that is? What do you think this is? And that's where this whole prop community sort of props up, and that's really, kind of this birthplace of sort of everything else that was to come. Prior to that, and that really gave me an avenue for this stuff that was beyond just the computer stuff, which was getting frustrating.
Right.
And certainly, I'd be totally remiss not to mention that so in college we were shooting a lot of puppetry stuff, and I don't know if anybody out there is looking for advice, but if you do things and you're proud of them and the people that inspired you are out there, send it their way. You never know what's going to happen. And I did that with the Henson Company, and I sent them a video we made in college that was very much inspired by the Muppets and all of the stuff they do. And that wound up getting me, a very nice call from Kevin Clash, who was the performer for Elmo for years, and all these other characters, and one of their top puppeteers ever. That ultimately led to me getting a tour of the main house that they had up in New York, and then eventually a tour of the workshop, which was that's Candyland for me.
Sure. I can't imagine. Yeah,
all of these people just making cool stuff. They were all making pigs at that time because it was for Muppet Treasure Island, and they were making pirate pigs, and this is amazing. And then that led to, and it's all, you never get what you don't ask for. I was at the main house and I said, do you ever do tours of the workshop? Sure, come next Wednesday. Okay. I'm at the workshop. This is amazing. Do you ever do internships? Yeah, we actually have one up right now. You can apply for it. So, I applied for that, put together the portfolio. The portfolio class in high school paid off,
Finally, right.
And then there's now I wind up getting this internship, and I wind up meeting all of these people doing this creative stuff for a living. And that wasn't a thing I knew existed really, other than, seeing it on TV, seeing it in the making ofs.
Sure.
And that's where that's that foundation that you need, I think. You need to know this is possible. You need to know you can do it. And it's that one-to-one experience with it that really can make you settle in with the idea, like, okay, this is worth pursuing. This isn't fruitless. This isn't foolish. Like some folks would lead you to believe. This is achievable. If you got the heart, if you got the skill, if you got the right luck and connections, and I was lucky. And so that's how that all kind of started.
Wow. And then, so from there, was the first thing, your first sort of connection into directly into movie props, other than obviously a lot of the Muppet things. How did you get involved in restoration? Was kind of the next step for you, right? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, it grew out of the making. Making is repairing.
Right.
When you make stuff, it's basically a series of fixes. And when you learn to sculpt and make monster masks, every casting comes out with some air bubbles or little flaws to take care of. And I got good at fixing that stuff because I was bad at casting. But I got better. But it's trial and error when you start.
Sure.
Ultimately, I had a job in TV for a long time on the technical side. At the switcher, we used to joke we were blowing up Alderaan. We had like a little. But all the while, I'm sculpting, I'm making stuff, I'm making props, I'm interacting with all these great folks online who have the same passions, the same hobbies, and we're trading and selling and swapping things back and forth. And that's, now you get into mid to late 90s, and now there's people who are collecting real movie props. And that's starting to come to the forefront as an accessible hobby. Prior to that, it was the sort of thing that you thought, you only see that at Planet Hollywood. You only see that at a museum. People don't own this stuff. This is, this is only for super rich guys. And I wound up meeting just some amazing folks doing this stuff. And some of them are like absolute average regular Joes who, back in the day happened to be in the right place at the right time to go in and help the rental houses out and cleaning out their inventory, and then come away and they're like, oh yeah, I have half of Star Trek, the original series wardrobe here now. Like, wow. It's just, crazy stuff that's just in your normal average everyday guys kind of thing. And so then dealing with those folks, we start realizing that this stuff isn't always made to last, and maybe some of it needs special care. And I start looking at it with a real critical eye, because I'm passionate about preserving this stuff. I feel like the fact that folks like you and I were so touched by those making of specials tells me that this ephemera of these films that we love is important. This stuff needs to be held to a standard, and preserved and kept around for people to enjoy. And so I started working at, what does that mean? What does it take to keep something around? What's good for a costume? What's bad for a costume? What's good for latex and foam latex and polyfoam and resin and silicone and all of these different materials? They all have their own quirks. And, I'd read up anything I could. I would talk to anyone I could that knew about this stuff. You would get, you talk to 10 different effects guys, and every one of them had a different recipe for what made for a good foam piece, what made it last and what didn't. Ultimately, a friend of mine named Brandon Allinger, he's the head of Prop Store of London's LA office. They're doing a big auction right now. Actually, they sold some amazing Star Wars stuff today, just today.
Oh, boy. There were things on that list that I was like, do I send my kids to college? Or do I buy?
No.
I think I should have made the investment here. Yeah.
Well, is college really an investment? Let's go with the props.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But so he, this is now, I had been restoring some stuff for myself and helping do things that helped preserve my own stuff. putting things on custom forms and making customized mannequins to better fit costumes and things like that. But the first high-profile Star Wars thing came through Brandon, and that was Stuart Freeborn and Kay were moving to a smaller cottage. They had a small estate for a while with 5 greenhouses that were filled with all this stuff from their 50 years of makeup history.
Wow.
From 2001 all the way and before, all the way through Star Wars and well beyond. I was lucky enough to bring a few pieces home when they decided to move, and through some friends of ours at Prop Store, I called them up and said, hey, can you help us find some homes for this stuff? And I was very lucky to be one of those homes for some of it, which makes me very thrilled. And probably my favorite thing out of all of that is I actually have Stuart's notes on the cantina scene. Now, I'm an obsessive researcher of that scene. But I've got a stack full of handwritten and notes and sketches and all this stuff that Stuart put together when he was making the scene. And he just threw it all in a folder after the movie. And it was like, whoop, that's my notes on that scene.
Wow.
And it's really cool going through that stuff. And that's really helped. We've been doing these panels at Star Wars Celebration every year for, however many years they've been going, except last year. It was either me and Pablo Hidalgo or sometimes me and Amy Ratcliffe. And we deep dive into that cantina, and we pull stuff out of there people have never seen before. We pull photos from the Lucasfilm archives no one's seen. We scanned photos that I've gotten from crew members that people didn't know, even existed. And we're IDing actors and props and set dressing and masks. And a lot of that stuff comes out of Stuart's notes and John Marlowe's notes and all this other stuff we've gotten to go through. And it's an obsession that brings me a lot of joy.
I'm sure.
But Brandon brought the Ugnaughts home from that. He had gotten 4 Ugnaught masks that had been stored, stuffed with newspaper, less than ideal, in a greenhouse, also not ideal.
Sure.
Not to speak ill of the dead, but, they weren't thinking longevity. Stuart just thought, I needed a place to put this.
Sure. Yep.
In the bag, in the loft, in the greenhouse, in the heat. Just leave it. I was concerned about it. I had been restoring some stuff. Like I said, most of the time it was my own, so I didn't feel the risk.
Right.
When Brandon came to me with those, he was like, you think you can fix these up? And I'm like, I don't want to ruin them, Right. And he said, they're kind of already garbage. So, why don't you see what you can do? And I managed to pull them out of the fire. I managed to actually make each one of those into a really respectable, visually kind of aesthetically pleasing, more visually complete piece. And I learned a lot in the process. And I learned a ton about Stuart and Graham Freeborn, his son's process too, just even going that in depth on a mask like that. Like, you're really up close and personal with these things. And you're seeing, how they assembled these, how they got, they took fewer appliances and pieced them together in different ways to make it look like there were more different characters. They weren't individual full mask sculpts on each, which was really cool.
Oh, wow.
And so that's really the first big, name Star Wars piece that I got to work on. Luckily wasn't the last.
So what Matthew here is asking, what was your favorite Star Wars item that you had a chance to restore?
Ooh. I answer this one a lot. I'm gonna stick with my answer. I try and mix these up sometimes, but it's Muff Tack. So Rick Baker calls him the spider guy, I guess because of the multiple eyes or whatever.
Right.
But so Muff Tack from the Cantina it's a costume that goes from just a little below the waist up over your head. It was in the collection of my dear friends Bob and Kathy Burns. Kathy actually just passed away last month. And they are, along with those special teachers in your life, you have those people that come into your life at just the right moment and who push you to be better and to do stuff that maybe you didn't think you could do, or to pursue something that you maybe were afraid to jump into. And that's Bob and Kathy. Those are people that they did this for a lot of effects guys I know. There's hardly anyone hardly anyone in the industry that does makeup or monsters that doesn't, either know of them, but really more times than not, it's, oh, I used to go over there in the summers and hang out at Bob's place, and he used to tell me all these stories about the 50s and these monsters they used to make and whatever else. Bob and Kathy are like these historians. They have this huge collection of original material from all different movies, including a lot of Rick stuff. And so they had the original Muff Tack. It was starting to tear in a few places. The stitches were coming undone. The foam underneath it was starting to be stressed. And a lot of it was down to the fact that it was resting on like a hat rack or something, like not an ideal support system.
Sure.
So that's a piece that came into our studio. We had my friend Brandon picked it up from them, packed it carefully. We shipped it at great expense to us in New York. And the whole team just went to town for Bob and Kathy, and we just said, don't worry, we're going to take care of them. And inside and out, we refurbished that. We strengthened all of the foam inside of it. We made a custom insert that isn't just like a body to put it on or a mannequin. It's actually made to fit specifically inside that costume and fill it out in every possible way, and to separately support the head, which sits above your head. And normally there's a lot of stress and it wants to come down. We figured out some little engineering tricks to make that supported. And then we went through and we, refurbished them on the outside. We did all the stitching. We reinforced some little areas here and there in the fur. And like the coolest part of all of it, and if you go to the Tom Spina Designs website, search Muff Tack, you'll find this project. You'll find the pictures. We shampooed Muff Tack twice. And it's because he had like 40 years of, house dust and studio dust, because he had been in Rick Baker's shop for years just collecting shop dust. And he was just this dingy gray color. And we managed to, we changed him like, 8 shades on the spectrum back towards that whiter color.
Right.
And, it was a really extreme overhaul, but I'm such a Cantina nerd. Yeah. And Muff Tack was one of the characters in that 2-page spread in that storybook that imprinted on me like a baby chick. Right. And so that's probably, that's the favorite one.
That's great. Now, what's your favorite character in the Cantina?
All right, I'll pick a few.
I was to say, I'm not sure if that's a fair question, but
it's hard. I love the weird one. So the Don Rickles alien, Bomb Wyndham, that's an old Rob Bottin sculpt that he made before Star Wars, but brought in and used for the show. They made an extra casting of it and painted it up just for the show. And so I always gravitate towards that one. It's just a really cool design, and I love that they would call him Don Rickles behind the scenes, because it just makes sense when you look at him. Muff Tack is outstanding. Hammerhead is incredible. John Berg made that. Ron Cobb's artwork actually sold for that today. And it was something he had sketched decades before Star Wars. As like this weird time traveling alien or something like that. And then he resketched it for Star Wars, but it's clearly that same alien. And that's the kind of stuff I love.
Yeah.
But if I had to really pick one, it's probably, I'm just going to go for like just straight up mask sculpt.
Sure.
It's a tie. All right. If I had to pick one, it's a tie. That's not picking one top. But the Duros, that was another Ron Cobb sketch, but Phil Tippett sculpted him. They called him Goggle Eyes or whatever. That scared the hell out of me as a kid. Again, in that 2-page spread, it's the two of them looking right at the camera and like, you talk about doing this when you look at the page, you're like, but the Cantina Band might just be like the quintessential Star Wars alien.
Yeah. My kids call them the Buttheads.
Yeah. It's a Rick Baker sketch. Doug Beswick, who's a wonderful human being, sculpted it. And I got to see one of those original masks in Disney World at MGM Studios. It was early 90s, like 90 or 91, just past Star Tours. There was a brick building that eventually became bathrooms and like Buzz Lightyear Pizza Planet. Now it's like a Gonzo themed pizza thing, or Pizza Rizzo. That's it. Which is just funny. Like, you know, yeah, it used to have Star Wars props and now it's got the Muppets. It's my life.
Yeah, that's right. It's the Tom Spina building there.
Yeah, fine by me. But so I walked into that building and it was just like this empty building at the time. And they had like Rocketeer props and Star Wars props and Indiana Jones stuff. And the one thing that stuck with me, and I still have the photo I snapped of it, one out of like 24 photos, because that's all we had in the roll,
Right.
A Cantina band mask that was used in Star Wars. The mask, the real thing. And I had been like trying to sculpt this in KB Toys clay in my backyard, you know, or in the basement, and trying to mold it in plaster of Paris, which again, less than ideal for anybody trying this at home. And now here's the real thing. And I'm seeing the size of it. Like, it's bigger than I thought. And it's like the style of sculpting. It's real chunky. Like it's got, everything's deep. These are, you know, this is not cautious sculpting. This is this is aggressive sculpting. This is someone who had 3 weeks to make dozens of aliens kind of sculpting. But it made us a huge impact. And I think that's probably why I gravitate towards that one, is just seeing that real mask the first time, having it be the first real Star Wars thing I got to see in person too. You know, it's like a junkie chasing that first high, I think. I don't know. Did I get too deep? Do we talk about junkies on this show? Or
yeah, we could talk. Hey, this is an open to any conversation show. But,
okay, good.
This is the first time we've talked about junkies, though, so this is good. It's been it's been a dry 2 years without hitting junkies. So we finally did it. Thank God.
But our types of junkies just are addicted to like old latex monster masks, though. So it's not quite the same.
No, I think it's safe.
You know.
Yeah, I think it's still safe. But it's interesting because you talked about getting into restoration and what you found there with Muff-Tack, and then also sort of seeing these things over the years. Andrew asked a question, which is a really good one, and is that as we move through, and because in the 90s also, movie restoration also started to feel like it was becoming a thing, right? I mean, that was they were restoring the print, which is one of the reasons why the special editions came out, right? And they were surprised at how deteriorated it was. Do you think, and as Andrew puts it, with modern items, do you think that they're going to hold up more because now there's a little bit more awareness, or are we still in a stage where, I mean, it's amazing when you hear these stories about, the land speeder was just thrown back in a junkyard when it was done or whatever. Are they building them and storing them to last now a little bit more?
I mean, I would say this. You're always going to have so any film, especially a Star Wars type film, generates a massive amount of stuff, more stuff than anyone can save. And an archivist's job, whether they're working for Lucasfilm now or the Skywalker Ranch archives, is to look at the assets of that film when it wraps and figure out what can be, put back into circulation somehow, what can be, recycled, reused, what should be held and preserved because it's important, and what can't be saved. Right. In terms of how the stuff is made and how the stuff is stored, there is a quantum leap in how Star Wars stuff is stored. You now have so to separate the two, you have the Lucasfilm archives, which is now part of the Lucasfilm Museum of Narrative Art. That's George's personal stuff. That's his collection. That's at Skywalker Ranch. And then you have the current Lucasfilm archives, which is basically taking care of anything post 2012. And that's a huge responsibility. And those people are absolutely wonderful. And they are making every effort to not just preserve whatever they can, but to do it in a way that is to a museum standard, to, a standard of what's best for the piece beyond just, well, we should keep that. They're not just sitting out in some hot warehouse or no temperature control, whatever. Like, these are things that get, custom supports and custom crates and all of this stuff. In terms of how they make this stuff, it's interesting. For the most part, so some of the stuff is on the newer movies is made incredibly well. The engineering on a lot of this stuff and the methods on making like the first order stormtroopers are insane when you look back at the vacuum form troopers of the original trilogy.
Right.
These are masterful pieces of engineering. They are, I don't know exactly how that particular material holds up over time, but I mean, they're pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That said, the goal of any movie prop is to last until the director says cut.
Yeah.
So you still have plenty of foam latex. You still have, it is still the state of the art when it comes to making appliances and puppets because it's so lightweight, it's so flexible. Unfortunately, it doesn't stay that way. But for the duration of the shoot, it is the ideal material for this stuff. Silicones have come into the mix. They're not used as broadly as I think some people might think these days. But the challenge with silicones is there's different types. When you're using them in an effects application where you need serious flexibility, you've got to add these deadeners to it that sometimes can continue to act on it after the fact. And actually, we've seen some silicone stuff from fairly recent movies. I'm talking like, 2010, 2012 movies that these silicone things melt. Now, it's not everything. There's only certain types of silicone that's going to happen to it, and only certain. But again, the mindset isn't about what's this going to look like in a decade. The mindset is this going to be flexible enough and look right on screen tomorrow?
Right. And
when the director says cut, are we good? Is it going to hold out in case he needs to do a reshoot in a couple of weeks? Right. So, the materials haven't changed drastically. The handling and storage is absolutely transformed from the past. Yeah. And it's great. It's actually really cool to see this stuff preserved. And we've done stuff with both the old archives, restoring for them, and with the new archives, making things like custom mannequins and stuff to put some of the costumes on and things. And I just feel lucky to even get to be around some of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. Has there been any what would you? Let me ask it this way: What's a pinch me moment for you with some of the Star Wars stuff you've had access to?
Oh, man. So it's constant. I mean, if you can't walk through the life that we've got here at our, whether it's just the stuff I've done personally, professionally, anybody that comes through our studio, I've got to pinch myself every day. And I'm not exaggerating. I just feel insanely fortunate to be around this stuff all the time like this. And I think, so the easy answer is probably the first visit to the archives. And that's the Skywalker Ranch archives. There's a less nerdy answer might be, so there's actually an inn at Skywalker Ranch, and when you have business there, sometimes you can stay. Yeah. That was a pretty cool pinch me kind of moment too, because that's when you start to feel like you've arrived. Something like, only people who have business here can do this. Oh, I have business, But the first time going to the archives and standing in that central space and looking around, you know what? I'm actually going to go back from this. So that getting to the archives the first time is actually pre-Regal Robot. It was after we had done a commercial. It was for the Super Bowl where we had remade a bunch of the Cantina aliens. And that was a pinch me project right there. Just getting the phone call was a pinch me project. Sure. But on set, we got to meet some of the people that took care of the archives because they had brought some of the prequel aliens to be in the background of our aliens, which was hilarious to us. Just right. Oh, right. We'll put our stuff way back here. Like, no. Your guys, the hero stuff. It all has to be up front. We're just going to put our real ILM made, prequel aliens behind you. Like, yeah.
Are you sure?
But getting to know them on set and stuff, they gave us the invite to come up if we were ever in town. And I immediately lied and said I was going to be in town in like 2 weeks. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm coming right out there. Really? Oh yeah, we're around that week. Why don't you stop by? Oh, okay. It's like plane ticket, book, but the walking onto the set, we had a day before the shoot, we had to do the fitting. It was actually 2 days before we did the shoot, the fitting. The next day was just dressing all the costumes. But during the fitting day, we walked into the set. And it was like literally walking into Star Wars. Like they built a fully enclosed cantina for this shoot, and they used the original blueprints, which I had, because nerd, I had them. I'm like, here you go, use the blueprints, and all this other stuff. But they did such an amazing job of it, and the way it was lit, all that. There's all this backlight coming through the windows, and there's the light coming through the top of the bar, and that's how that scene's lit. There's not a lot of extra lights going on in there. And I just remember I was going crazy getting everybody fit, and Brian Lewis was one of our sculptors at the time, comes up to me, and he's like, Tom, you got to come over here. And I'm like, and we're on a separate stage. Because I'm like, all right, I got to do this. Like, they can handle it. You got to come over here. I'm like, okay. I walk with him. And 2 things happen. So first, we're on stage 28 in Universal lot, which has since been torn down and remade, but it was the Phantom of the Opera stage from 25.
Okay.
So I walk in and they still had the theater up from that. And that's what was famous about that stage, other than the haunting. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't. It was haunted. So we walk in, and there's the theater from Phantom of the Opera. And I'm a huge Universal Monsters fan, and I'm like, oh my god! And he's like, no, this isn't it. It's like, well,
wait, there's more.
I need to take this in. So then he walks me in through the back of the cantina, and I there it is. There's the pinch me moment. It's just like I just walked into Star Wars, and it only got better once all the aliens were in there and the lights were all right and the smoke was in there in the background and you had the atmosphere. So yeah, I'll give you that.
That's great. Well, geez, I mean, especially there's seems to be a recurring theme of the cantina with what drove you, and so to even be able to be a part of, I mean, just like you said, getting the phone call to do that must have been. And which Super Bowl ad was that?
It was a Volkswagen spot. It was the one that followed the much, much better ad, the Vader Kid ad.
The Vader Kid, yeah.
It's tough to find because they pulled it down years later and, online. And anytime you go to post it up, it gets pulled down, for copyright or whatever. We've got some photos from this. We've got a lot of photos, both from the shoot and from our behind the scenes when we were building the stuff. But they found me because I learned to sculpt making cantina guys. Like that was my obsession. And I taught myself how to sculpt making, of course, werewolves and vampires with half their face ripped off and stuff too. But also,
right.
The Don Rickles guy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was actually through Pablo Hidalgo and Steve Sansweet at Lucasfilm when Volkswagen called them up. They were like, hey, we want to borrow these Star Wars aliens. And it was just like, well, we don't have them. And even if we did, they're old, they're foam latex, they're falling apart. But what you need is someone like Tom Spina. Like, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And so I that to me is just another one of those, like, do what you're here to do what you're into, and, put it out there in the world. And, it doesn't look, you have to be, there's obviously a degree of luck in all of this,
sure,
but nothing happens if you don't do it. So
that's great. And that's super important. And I think, that's like career advice I give people is just make sure you're doing something you love and you're going to find a way to make it work. And certainly sounds like that's sort of been the path you've been on. So what was the path then from restoration and prop reproduction for Star Wars projects and other projects? I mean, like you said, visit Tom Spina Designs, and I mean, it's Rocketeer, it's werewolves,
there's
everything
and wax figures and mannequins and giant dinosaurs,
So how do you go from that to Regal Robot to creating, purchasable props and also, is it Spina Design or is it Regal Robot that does sort of the the man cave kind of productions and the very custom pieces?
A little bit of each, yeah.
Okay.
So with TSD, we do the kind of the non-branded home theming type stuff. If it's Star Wars, a lot of times I will run it through Regal. We actually just did a bunch of Rogue One inspired furniture for someone. It was side tables that were sort of an Imperial Rebel theme. We did these giant 6-foot wall plaques, hand carved to look like Mustafar and Vader's castle and the fallen statue on Jeddah, and stuff like that. And that's all stuff you'll find on the Regal Robot site in the Custom Furniture Studio. The Regal grew out of us doing the Han Solo and Carbonite desk, which we did for a Grammy-winning musician who wanted a cool desk for his office, and he was going to auction it for charity. So he's like, let's do something Star Wars. Let's do something fun. I'll keep it for a year and we'll auction it off. And to his word, he did. And so we came up with the Han Solo and Carbonite desk, and that just went nuts online for us in a time before Twitter and Facebook and all of that. And that really kind of put us on the map on the home theming front. And it also made us realize Rich Riley, who was my design partner at the time for all of that kind of stuff, we always used to talk about we wanted to see stuff that felt like the Disney theme parks. We wanted to see repurposed stuff. We didn't want to see just a desk with a logo on it, or a chair that had a stool with a symbol on it or something like that. I mean, that stuff's fine, and we do some of that stuff. But we wanted stuff that felt like it was part of that universe, and that it was to look at something in a totally new way and make it functional. And that's the spark. I mean, we did it with a do-back, for crying out loud. Eventually, on Regal Robot, there is a do-back sofa that we brought to one of the celebrations.
Yes.
And that's just you could not get more quintessentially us than that as a concept, because to me, for starters, we scanned the original do-back head from the first Star Wars for that, which is just also ridiculous, just as in the first place. But we're this is how a meeting like that goes. It's all right, celebration's coming up, guys. We got to come up with something really cool. I want to have something that people can interact with and really get take a lot of photos with. And it's just kind of well, could we do this? Oh, we could do a statue for someone to be with. And I'm like, what if it's something that people can sit on? We make, because we do the furniture stuff. And then Riley's just it'd be cool. We could do a do-back that's a sofa. And it's just everyone stops, turns, and in any normal business, that would be the point that guy got kicked out of the room. Right. But in ours, it's go home, boys, we're done. Let's get some Dr. Peppers and we're going home. That was it. It was just yes, we are now making a do-back. Everyone starts sketching. And that's way more formal than it actually was. But that's the kind of stuff that, I love taking a fresh look at something. I love turning something upside down or on its head, or find out a way to, oh, well, if you took this and hung it on a wall, it could be this. And it took us a few years to convince Lucasfilm that was a thing. Right. They and it didn't help that this is now just post Disney merger, and so now we're having to convince not Lucasfilm, but now you've got Disney people in their consumer department, and we're navigating a very different space for us. We're artists. Sure. I'm a businessman, but ultimately artist. And when you get into licensing, that's heavy duty business talk. Sure. And so here I am talking to different licensing folks, pitching the Han Solo and Carbonite desk, pitching the Millennium Falcon flying through the asteroids as a coffee table. And they're and it's going to cost how much? Right. You're going to make each one by hand? You're not going to make 10,000 of these overseas? And I was no, there's not 10,000 people that want this, but for the few people that do, we want to make something special. Right. And then, we're talking about these magnets and skulls and things that we want to do, all this Mandalorian stuff, pre the show Mandalorian. And ultimately, we wound up finding someone at Disney that we just finally got the right person. I put in this push, and apologies if I'm going way too far into detail here, but I had tried it for 2 or 3 years, and it just wasn't happening. And I said, you know what? let's give this one more shot. I'm like, I have been so lucky. I've gotten to know all these different people, from the archives to Lucasfilm proper to Disney. I sent out 20 emails in a day, and I just said, who do you know that could be the person to talk to? Because everyone I've talked to has shut me down. And somebody gave me a different name. It was like, everybody gave me, there was like 2 or 3 names that all came up. One of them was different. And I said, I'll give it a shot. And showed that person our deck. And the first thing they said was like, oh man, I want that Han Carbonite coffee table for my living room.
Yep.
And it was like, that's the person. Okay, they get it. And I think we had a contract like 2 weeks later. Like, it was insanely fast how fast it happened. And then it was just a mad dash for the next celebration, which would have been, it was about a year later. So it's 2017 celebration, for us to be like, ready to launch and have some products to sell there,
right?
And be able to tell people what we're doing. And, so we debuted that show with, we had the asteroid table, we had the Han Carbonite desk there, we had the Dubak sofa, we had some of our director chairs, and the Mythosaur skulls that we were doing. And, we connected. People dug it. People got into what we were doing.
Yeah.
And that was a really awesome feeling. It was a great launch. And it was just like, I'm so glad we got to do it at Celebration. If we had just done it online, it wouldn't have been great. Sure. It just wouldn't have felt right.
Yeah.
To do it in person at Celebration and connect with all these, all of my old friends, because I've been going to these shows forever. I've been doing the panels and stuff. But then all of the new fans, and then to be able to, be at a panel with 900 people and be like, hey, by the way, go to this booth,
Yeah.
And make all of these new friends. Oh man. Yeah. What a time. And we've now done a few shows, as Regal through and the celebrations. And it's always just, it's just incredible every time.
Yeah. And it's funny. I can't tell you how many times so first of all, it feels like whenever you come out with a new product, it shows up on Twitter and it's always like surrounded by, holy cow, you got to go see this. You got to go see this. And I've spent more time than I probably should just looking at the products you've created, and just because they're so unique and they're so cool. And now you have some things that are a bit more accessible, right? Because you do have the $5,000 table and
right.
super custom things, which are amazing. And as you said, and it was, I can imagine where it was a difficult sort of pitch, because it is, it's a very niche group, right? It's not everybody's going to,
but it was a place they weren't in that space. That was my whole thought, was like, you have tons of people doing tchotchkes. You have tons of people doing t-shirts. You don't need another person just doing straight prop stuff.
Right.
This is an area where no one is, and it's really cool and it's really fun. And I think it could be something, and then it got to be something. And like, that's the coolest part.
Yeah. And I think what's cool too, is you also tend to pick things that are, you're not doing lightsaber handles, right? And as you said, there's a million of them, and there's different levels, and you can buy
look at my shirt, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Like Snaggletooth's belt buckle from the Blue Snaggletooth. Like, this is us. Like, when we're picking a droid to do, we didn't do C-3PO, we did CZ3 as a bust.
Yes.
Because he's this awesome, goofy, cross-eyed droid from the background of the Sandcrawler shambling around Mos Eisley. And as a kid, I fell in love with the background stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And you're right, though. There's a ton of accessible stuff on the site. I think we probably have a lot of people who find the site through a link, and maybe they just come in directly on like the busts and statues page or the custom furniture page, where the real high-end stuff is. Right. But if you go to the furniture and decor page, or you go to just the straight up art and decor page.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to see this stuff, regalrobot.com/Star Wars. That gets you right to our Star Wars landing page. There's 4 different categories. Explore them all. If there's stuff you can't afford, you're still going to love to see it. Right. And then the other stuff, there's plenty that's, $20, $30, $40 stuff, $100 stuff. That's amazing, and will definitely help make your man cave that much better. Trust me. But we love that kind of stuff. We've been doing these magnets for a while now. We ran a special exclusive magnet for Celebration of the gargoyles on Jabba's dais.
Yep.
And those sold every day. We had a line of people waiting to buy them. And so we've expanded on that line. We've done other prop-ish stuff like the Mandalorian's grav charge, the little bombs he uses.
Yep.
The restraining bolt just came out. That's our most recent one. And it's a really accurate representation of the prop, but it's also just a handy thing to put on your fridge and make sure your fridge doesn't wander away. And then also a whole Beast series, bronze look and silver look Tauntauns and Rancors and Dewbacks, oh my. And the Dewback, of course, even on the $29 magnet, we're using the same 3D scan we took off the real prop head.
Yeah.
That's how obsessed we are with this stuff.
But I keep telling my wife, who just, my studio is literally what you see behind me it's a walk-in closet at the other side of the house that has been now converted into, I call it the studio, but it's I tell her, I'm like, when I win the lottery, there's going to be a Tauntaun head on this wall.
We just finished 8 Tauntaun busts, so life-sized 1-to-1 Tauntauns. We had gotten to examine the real one in the archives, the puppet that was used in Empire, then reused in Return of the Jedi on the wall in Jabba's palace. And so, with all that firsthand knowledge of that thing, we got to remake this.
Yeah.
And to see 8 of these things in the studio all at once, we had them on this little tiered place where they were all together at one point, and it looked like a chorus, like a ready to break into a song or something. But each one of them is like 38 or 40 inches tall.
Yeah.
They're like 26 inches across. The big horns, the snout sticks way out. I mean, they're massive and they're loaded with detail, and it's just it's so cool seeing stuff like that come from nothing, and to have initially do the clay sculpts and the molds and all of that stuff. And then once all that's done, to say to the crew, like, okay, we need to make like 7 or 8 of these, and to just watch, every day another one comes out of the mold. And then you look in the casting room and there's, 2 Tauntaun heads, and there's 3, then there's 4, then there's 5, then there's 6, and then they start getting the eyes drilled out, then the teeth coming in, and then you look and someone's got a table full of Tauntaun tongues, because that's a thing that happens here, and eyeballs and all of this stuff, and just little by little, different people are working on different parts of it, and then the pieces start coming together, and then somebody's putting paint on it, and that's when really starts coming. Then you're drilling each hole for the whiskers, or you're putting the snow on them, or building the reins, and and all the distressing. We're really, I feel like the real key thing with a lot of the stuff we do is we try to treat it the way we would for something we would bring in a set, and try to give it that distressed feeling, that that reality. Mark Hamill says something in The Making of a Saga, where someone's hand painting the eyes on Squidhead, and he's just like, maybe they're not of this earth, but they had to look as if they were from some earth somewhere. And I really took that to heart, even as a kid. Like, this stuff had to be dirty, it had to be worn in, it had to get that lived-in look that they always talk about. And so we go for that. We make those CZ3s and we dirty them up. We make these Tauntauns and their hair's all matted down and covered in snow and whatever else. It feels real. It feels like a thing that's in front of you that's gonna start making Tauntaun noises. But it's just there you go, pinch me moment every time I walk in the studio.
That's amazing. Is there a I don't know if you can talk about things that you may have in the works, or things that you would love to, like, what's a creature that you would love to bring to life and available for people to purchase?
Man. There's a bunch of the maquettes. So we have a series of maquettes going right now.
Yep.
We have the Phil Tippett's original concept sculpture for the Tauntaun, which was one of my favorite concept sculptures in all of film. I saw pictures of it in old books and in these behind the scenes documentaries. And Phil luckily still had the mold, and we got to make a copy of that to make ours. So I love that lineage. We have that. We have a Gamorrean guard sculpt that Tony McVeigh did for The Mandalorian. That was the first thing we saw from Mando season 2.
Yep.
It's this amazing gladiatorial looking Gamorrean. Even better than they looked in the film, probably.
Yeah.
But it's a super cool sculpture. And then we now, the Jabba the Hutt was my favorite of the bunch, and it's almost sold out. There's like 19 left. If you were thinking of getting one, now's the time.
Now's the time.
But that was based on Phil's concept sculpt for Jabba the Hutt, one of the 3 or 4 concepts they did there. there's a concept sculpt for Droopy McCool that there's something really neat about him. He's all like naked and mushroomy and just kind of like chilling. Like he looks like he's like, just hanging out. Oh man, I don't know. I mean, if I had to pick a 1-to-1 creature, I'll stay out of the Cantina because that's too easy. I might say Nikto. Nikto is one of my favorite sculpts from the original trilogy, and even the sculpt they did of him for the prequels, I thought was really well done. So that might be a cool one. I don't know that that's necessarily in the cards anytime soon for Regal, but I think that'd be real neat. I will say this: I can't share what we're working on just yet. However, we do have a new 1-to-1 creature piece coming out in about a month, maybe a month and a half, maybe 2 months. Those final hurdles of approval is always a little touch and go. And we have another bust in the works after that, and another bust in the works for after that. So there's plenty coming in that regard. There's also other magnets in the works and a few other wall plaque pieces that we're working on. We have a very full board of ideas.
That's great.
And we're constantly just trying to figure out how to squeeze this stuff into the schedule. I mean, we're a very small shop. There's 15, 20 of us there, even on the busiest days. If we hit 20, that's a crowded day in the studio. And a lot of this stuff is hand painted, hand assembled. When we're doing a run of something, like right now, we're working on those chess creatures. We've actually already started production on them. They're not supposed to ship till January, but I think we're going to get ahead on that. But the final numbers come in and you go like, oh, okay, we sold 77 sets, but then you realize that's 77 sets of 10 figures. That's 770 figures plus these extra 2-packs we sold. All of a sudden it's just like, oh, we have a lot of casting and painting ahead of us.
Yeah.
But it's already, knock on wood, it is going, and it's going very well. We've gotten all our production samples in of every character. All the molds are going. I'm absolutely loving the quality of every piece, and I'm in love with that set. I became obsessed with that set when we were working on it, and I have a full set of them in my office right now already. And it's just like, as great as it is to make this stuff, I mean, it's probably not going to surprise anybody that half the time when we make stuff, it's because I just want one for my office, my house.
That's why I would do it.
And I just hope that I can bring other people along with me. I'm like, oh, if I'm obsessed with this, there's got to be at least 100 other people that are obsessed with it. Let's do it, Well,
and that's the thing I think about Star Wars fans is, first of all, there's so much for everybody, right? We talked about it before we got on the show about how there's so many different avenues and different ways to get into Star Wars. And then I think you find that there's this level of people and I don't know, the Jabba maquette, like 99% of the average people wouldn't know what that was when they looked at it.
Why does Jabba look weird?
Right. And then 99% of the people who know what it is are like, it's nice, but I wouldn't want to buy one. Right. But those that want it, holy cow, like they have to own it. Right. Yeah. I can't tell you how many.
And that's me.
Yeah, right. And see that a market researcher 1 in Star Wars actually works for the stuff you do. Now, a Black Series action figure of maquette Jabba, not going to work. Right. But for people who want it here, it's that's where it really makes that connection. I can't tell you how many friends I've made that I now have through Twitter and have become who have bought the Docking Bay 94 plaque. It was but it spoke to them. It was like, I need that in my house.
Yeah. You can put it up in a main room in your house and nobody even knows what that is unless they like, that's we always call that's like the nod. That's Boba Fett looking at Leia in Jabba's palace and doing the like, that's one of those. You walk into somebody's house and you look at the 94 on his wall and you just kind of go like, well done, sir. I know exactly what that is.
That's right. We have a bond that needs not to be spoken.
It's like a secret handshake, you know? Like, that's no joke.
Yep. We have a question from a friend of ours, Podcast of Will's here, and he says, is there something within arm's reach that you could show the people on screen right now that you like? That's like your favorite thing?
unfortunately, I'm in my upstairs office and not my downstairs man cave. I don't have good enough internet reception to do video down there, sadly. But if I was down there, I would probably grab like, you know, one of the monster masks we had made. I have a copy of each of the Star Wars aliens we've made, and I've got a few of the screen used alien heads and things like that from the Cantina scene too. So I could have grabbed that. I guess really the only thing I've got I got a King Kong on my desk just because I like to remember where it came from. But other than that, around here it's mostly this sort of like vaguely Indiana Jones, Teddy Roosevelt sort of library thing. There's a bunch of African masks on the wall. I can't pull it down because it's screwed to the wall, but I do have part of a gaffy stick up there. Cool. Because gaffy sticks are made from a Chitokia, which is a Fijian war club. Mm-hmm. And so, and then it has a metal end added to it to make it a gaffy stick. So I actually have a real Fijian war club that we molded to make gaffy sticks for, originally just for ourselves and then for Mandalorian when they started doing the Tusken Raiders. Oh, yeah. And so I have that Fijian war club hanging on the wall just as a Fijian war club piece with these African masks and things like that. And it's again, stealth geek. It just looks like cool artifacts. But if you know Star Wars, you look at it and you're like, oh, I know what that is. I know why you have that. Yeah.
And so did I hear you right? Did you make the gaffy sticks for Mandalorian?
Yeah. Yeah. So we did those. We did we sent them a bunch of blasters. We sent them binocular props and the IG-88 heads behind the Cantina bar. Yeah. We did all of those for them. We also did those for the Star Wars park for Galaxy's Edge and made a whole bunch of stuff for the antiquarium, the Doc Ondar's antique store there. You know, all that cool stuff on the walls way up high. Yeah. We got to do a few little pieces in that.
That's great.
And just honored to be a part of that. That was an amazing thing just to even be a small little part of, and just to be able to get to go and visit their workshop when they were working on that was like, there's another pinch me moment, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and Doc Ondar's shop, for those who haven't been to Galaxy's Edge, that's a place where, you know, it's almost a problem, I imagine, because you just want to look around and spend an hour in the store, and meanwhile they're trying to rotate people through to buy.
I feel like they needed to make it like 5 times the size.
Yes,
because it really, and it's so a lot of this. I don't know if you know the name Eric Baker, but there's, I believe there's a series on Disney Plus called I'm not 100% sure. It might be like One Day at Disney or something like that. And if it's not that, it's one of the other Imagineering type shows. But they follow him around for a day, and he walks through Galaxy's Edge with them a little bit. He was the dresser for Harry Potter Land. We actually were just down in Florida and got to walk Diagon Alley with him and just hear all of these amazing stories about the stuff that they built for that. And his approach to dressing a land like that is full immersion and over-the-top detail. Right. Layers upon layers upon layers so that you can come back 100 times and still not see it all. And Doc Ondar's is like the quintessential Eric Baker room, in my opinion. You look around and there is just, you know, 8 feet of merchandise and 20 feet of the coolest stuff from around the galaxy that you ever saw.
Yep.
And, you know, you look around in there and there's no way to see it all. There's no way to take it all in. Like you said, you know, people just want to stop and look, but they're kind of like, okay, keep it moving. We got people waiting to get in here. Like, there's always a line to get in the shop. And that's, some of those people foolishly are there for the merchandise. What are you doing? Look up, you know? So yeah, he's someone, he's a super nice guy, incredible artist. I mean, just really, I think his design aesthetic really comes through in all of those shops, all of the little extra stuff, those little like kid speeders hanging outside the toy shop, the little like metal piece together looking spaceships up above Toydarian, all the different, I mean, all of the dressing around the land, all the droids outside, all of the, I mean, it's just bananas when you go looking through that place. Anybody who's been there knows, like, there's just everywhere you look, there's cool Star Wars stuff. If you ever see like those boxes that are hanging out around Mos Eisley, those kind of like weird clipped corner white boxes covered in Wrigley's, you know, that's stuff that his guys did. And just it's hard to put into words how great it is, and that's something that's like just a huge source of inspiration for me too.
Yeah.
Just, you go down there and it's like, oh, okay, creative recharge.
Yeah. Oh, and that's what I was very fortunate to be at. I went to Galaxy's Edge just before lockdown in California. And that's the thing that I always tell people is, yeah, sure, there's the Falcon, which is, mind blowing.
Right.
But when you just walk around the streets, there is 1,000 Star Wars Easter eggs and just they do such a great job of putting you into that world. And it's it was a risk creating a new world, but I think they probably benefited from that by not being sort of tied down to the expectation of if you went to a Hoth or a
Right.
Tatooine or something like
And
that.
I feel like it would have been interesting to see if they could do it in a way that was not tied to a time period.
Right.
Because I would love to see the Mandalorian walking through there.
Sure.
And I know, certainly from a story point of view, I get why that's complicated. But, it really would have been neat to have, and this is just me purely thinking out loud. This is not critiquing anything. I'm just saying, boy, what could have been neat to have different time zones or something like that, where you could have a section with the Empire, a section with the First Order, a section with prequel era stuff. Mean, maybe there's some plans for that in the future. Maybe there's other lands to come. I don't know, but I think it'd be amazing to apply this same sensibility to some of these other eras now. Yeah. And the immersion of it all is just insane. If you're a Star Wars fan and you walk through there, regardless of what era is your favorite, you're going to come out thinking that was really, really special.
Yeah. My crazy prediction is that we will see the Mandalorian land on Batuu and walk past the Millennium Falcon, but it'll just be in passing. And then now they get the clearance. They can put him there.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
But
he's under a helmet. He could just be old.
It could be anybody. Sure. Yeah.
He could be 30 years later. He could be 50, 60 years old under there. He's fine.
That's right. We don't know. Just make it happen. Oh, man. Well, Tom, I could probably keep going for another 2 hours just asking you to have this great conversation, but tell people where they can find you online and keep up with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So go to tomspinadesigns.com, go to regalrobot.com. And if you're on social anywhere, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, especially, look up Tom Spina Designs and at Regal Robot. If you can't find any of that, just search my name. It's down here somewhere. There you go. And remember to like and subscribe to Around the Galaxy. And I don't know, what is it the kids do? It's always a like and subscribe, right?
Yeah, I don't. It's funny. My daughter, she's 11. She's got this dream of being a YouTube person. She says like and subscribe all the time. So I'm guessing that's what it is.
Like just at dinner, it's
right. Yeah,
it's great. Like and subscribe. This isn't the time. Well, no, I appreciate you having me on, man. If you ever want to talk for 2 more hours, I'm happy to come back someday, and I'm sure we could do that. It seems like.
Yeah, no, I would definitely love to have you back on, and sure. As you get some new stuff out too, I'd love to have you tell us about it. That would be fantastic to do. Right. But hey, thank you so much for hanging out. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me. Everybody at home, thanks for watching.
Awesome. Before I let you go, let me get you to do a little bumper of This is Tom Spina from either Designs or Regal, whichever you want to do, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Okay, doke. Hey, everybody, this is Tom Spina from Tom Spina Designs and Regal Robot, and you are watching Around the Galaxy.
Awesome.
Did I do enough finger guns? Did I need 2 more of this?
No, you need more finger guns, but I think...
what's the... I don't know the protocols here.
It's this whole
like and subscribe.